I did 7 interviews in Montreal in 1976 with Bruce Jenner. That at one point he said to me, "We're on camera so often here, people are going to think there's something going on."
Welcome to Story and Craft. Now, here's your host, Mark Preston.
Okay, here we go, another episode of Story and Craft. Welcome back. Glad to have you. If this is your very first episode, thank you very much for stopping by, checking it out. Do appreciate it. Today, we have a great episode. Hall of Fame sportscaster and author Jim Lampley. Now, Jim has covered everything, football, boxing, the Olympics, just all kinds of stuff. I mean, we covered like everything, Mike Tyson, Muhammad Ali. Jim is such a great storyteller, a guy with a big heart, has a lot of stories to tell. No way we could fit them all in this episode. So you ought to check out his new book. It's available for pre-order right now. It is called It Happened, Uniquely Lucky Life in Sports Television. It is coming out April 15th, but of course, pre-order it right now wherever you get your books. It was a great conversation. I really could have talked to him all day long. Just so many great stories about his career and kind of what he's up to right now. Also, want to drop a quick note in. We had a conversation a few weeks back with actor Jordan Bridges. He was in Den of Thieves, if you remember, the sequel. He's also in the TV show Palm Royale, one of my favorite characters in the show. Now, we discussed during our episode with him, he likes to put together playlists. And he said he was going to offer up a custom playlist just for us. And it is available right now. He calls it Requiem for a Beach. Just go to storyandcraftpod.com and look up the episode with Jordan. It's on the front page. It's only a few episodes ago. And in the description of the episode, you will see a link right at the bottom. That's where you can check out his cool mix he made up, something very unique. Now, he also sent me a few links where you can help out the folks who were affected by the California wildfires. Just go take a look. It's on the front page. Look at the very top. It says California Fire Support. Just click on that link at the top of the page and you will be taken to a page where you can go find a few links to kind of help out the folks who were affected. And Jordan sent me some pictures of his backyard. It's like more of a canyonish looking thing. It was pretty wild. So hearts are with everybody in California. Of course, that's the reason why we're just now getting that link from Jordan. He's got a couple things he was working on. So go check out the music link to Spotify, the playlist. So thank you to Jordan for sending over that very cool Spotify link and, of course, the links so you can help out the good folks in California. Okay, also, since you're going to be at the website, by the way, storyandcraftpod.com, go to storyandcraftpod.com/rate. It's a small favor I'm asking. If you can just follow the show, that way you get notified every time there's a new episode, but also leave a review, leave some stars. You can do that also in whatever podcast app you listen to. It just helps folks to find the show and so they can experience the mischief we have going on here. All right, so let's jump right into it. Today, love this conversation. I could talk to Jim all day long. So many great stories. I've got to go get his book. It's coming out here in April because I want to know more of the stories. So here we go. Today, it is Jim Lampley Day right now on Story and Craft.
How are you?
I'm doing very well. I was running just 2 minutes behind. I have a rambunctious 10-month-old golden retriever who desperately wanted to stay down here with us, but I had to scoot him upstairs because he was wanting to sit in my lap.
I first acquired a golden retriever when I was living here in Chapel Hill in the early 70s. Eventually took the golden retriever to New York. Eventually gave him to my mother when she retired to the country.
Really?
His name was Ernie.
We just had this little guy for, I think, 9 months now. But we're going through the adolescent teen years, the rambunctious, nonstop kind of a thing. So you're in Chapel Hill right now.
I'm in Chapel Hill, yes.
So is that where you're originally from?
Return to Chapel Hill is a frequent and widespread syndrome of Carolina grads or Carolina dropouts, either one. It's very hard once you have been here, once you've lived here, once you have it in your system, it's hard to get it out. You may know that just recently, the university signed Bill Belichick to be the head football coach here, right?
No, I actually did not.
Bill Belichick is coming to coach the University of North Carolina college football team. Winner of 6 Super Bowls, arguably the most successful coach in NFL history. Why in the world would he take a head coaching job at the University of North Carolina in his 70s at this point?
Because of the aesthetic, just that's where he wants to be, or is he?
It's a Tar Heel coming home story. His father was an assistant coach here in the 50s. He was a little boy here in the 50s. He won the news conference here when he stood up at the podium and said, my parents always told me that the first words I ever learned to say out loud were beat Duke. So with that, he instantly cemented himself. But yeah, we all come home at some time or another, even Belichick.
Yeah, I'm originally from Dallas, but I had when I worked in radio many moons ago, I made a swing through New Orleans, and my ex-wife's from New Orleans. The same thing happens with a lot of folks from New Orleans, or if you marry somebody from New Orleans, you're going to end up living there at least a period of time. Now, I'm back in Texas, though, on the coast, so there's always this idea from folks that I've known that they're going to end up back there at some point in time.
Well, I think this happens with places that are arguably unusual or unique. And Chapel Hill has that identity. New Orleans has that identity. There aren't that many megalopoli, big cities in the USA that can make that claim that they are unique and different from other places. I think San Francisco can make that claim. Yeah. I think New Orleans can definitely make that claim. I think Boston can make that claim in some ways. And obviously, New York is New York. There is no other New York.
Was that the objective way back when you were deciding, okay, here's what I want to do, here's what I aspire to do? Was it going to be sportscasting, or were you thinking more just straight traditional journalism, or how did that manifest for you?
It is all an accident. Okay. The reason that the book is titled It Happened is because there was no plan, there was no roadmap, there was no logical way of constructing what was going to happen to me. I had very assertively attempted to throw my life away when I was flunking out of undergraduate school and sinking my grades to a level where it would be almost impossible to come back and graduate, and getting into a position where I had to go home to my mother's crappy rented apartment in Miami and work in the filing department of a large bank, and I was, I was gone. I had no horizons, no prospects.
Well, going back, what would you ascribe to being the issue? Was it just you were having just so much fun in college that the grades were secondary, or maybe the academia thing just wasn't how you were wired?
I was having so much fun in college that the grades were secondary, and I was from pretty much the moment I arrived here in Chapel Hill, I was a 17-year-old alcoholic. I was spending all day drinking beer and eventually bartending at a place called The Shack. Come down before it falls down. And I didn't go to class for about a year and a half or 2 years.
Really?
So at one point I had taken, let me get this straight. At one point I had taken 25 courses. I had passed 16 or 17 of them. I had a 1.44 academic average. I had to make A's on 2 correspondence courses, which was mountainous work and almost impossible to get back into school to regain my eligibility. And I did that. And I came back and I made a long string. I think I made 24 straight A's to graduate. So my undergraduate career is this unbelievable disconnect between the first person and the second person. Eventually, I wound up applying to graduate school in the radio, television, motion pictures department. And in those days, to get into the graduate program in that department, you had to meet with the chairman of the department, very boisterous, self-important dude. and I had to go in and sit at his desk and meet with him, have a personal interview to try to get into the graduate school program. And when I arrived, I saw that he had my transcript on his desk. So there was no way to hide any of this. And right in the middle of the transcript, if he looked carefully, he would find where I had taken his signature undergraduate course, RTVNP 58, never attended a class session, and made an F. So he looked it all over while I was sitting there. And I could see his eyes lighting up as he saw the RTVMP 58 and all the Fs and that kind of stuff. And eventually he looked at me and said, well, the Army sure did you a world of good, didn't it? I'd never been in the Army. And so when he said the Army did you a world of good, and I'm thinking, okay, that's positive. That cleans me up, but I don't want to lie.
Right.
So I gave him a kind of a head shake. It wasn't up and down. It wasn't anything that said yes or no. It was just a movement of the head. He bought it, and we went on. I wound up going to graduate school and being, for a period of time, the best graduate student in his program.
Sometimes takes those moments
again,
where things are where the bottom almost falls out, where you kind of see, oh, yeah, I better course correct, you know.
I was ashamed. And my double widowed single mother had sweated bullets and blood to get me through junior high school in Miami and high school in Miami and put me in a position to actually get into the University of North Carolina from out of state. And I had ruthlessly betrayed her by coming up here and dishonoring the whole thing, et cetera, et cetera. And I had gone home in shame and you know, had to watch her weep when I moved back into the apartment and wound up with job prospects of I could either become a trainee at the global headquarters of Burger King on Highway 1 in Miami, or I could go into the mortgage loan filing department at First National Bank of Miami with 2,500 feet of filing cabinets for women between the ages of 62 and 65 and me. And I took the bank job because it seemed more glamorous. And I did a good job, you know, catching the tiny errors here and there on endlessly deep mortgage loan packages, FHA and VA loans. And I did that for almost 2 years.
No, this is after you got your graduate degree?
No, this is while I was flunked out, dropped out. This is in the middle of this is when my undergraduate transcript was all Fs, and this is before I went back and made it all As. The purgatory in the bank filing room is what motivated me to actually go back to school and try to succeed. Because I recognized, I eventually, when I decided I was going to go back, and the word got around the department, I got called into the chief executive of the mortgage loan department's office, a guy I had never met named Gene Turkowski. And Mr. Turkowski was looking at my personnel file, and he looked across the desk and said, I hear you're going back to college. I said, yeah. He said, why would you do that? You have done so well here. You have gotten 3 pay raises in 13 months. You are really respected within the department. If you stay here, you can ultimately succeed to the level of becoming an assistant cashier here in the mortgage loan department. And my thought was, oh my God, he thinks this is the best I can do. He thinks that this is the limit of my horizons. Get me out of here. And that I used that as fuel to go ahead and follow through and come back to Chapel Hill and be a completely different person and do, because this is true Jekyll and Hyde type stuff. And I can honestly say when I arrived here in Chapel Hill, my only real motivation was, okay, the drinking age here is 18. I'm only 17, but I can get a fake ID and I will be able to drink in these bars in Chapel Hill. And, there are other really bloody elements of the whole thing. I lost my mother's 1964 Oldsmobile Cutlass in a poker game at the SAE house.
Really?
And, it goes on and on and on. And so no one would have foreseen that this person would someday be writing his autobiography about his fairly successful and respected sports television broadcasting career. No one would have foreseen that.
Well, so you're mentioning Miami. Is that where you grew up originally, or?
I'm originally from Hendersonville, North Carolina.
Okay, okay.
My mother was a double widow to two World War II bomber pilots. And the second one was a Hendersonville, North Carolina resident. She lived there for probably 10 or 12 years, raising my older half brother and me. My father died when I was 5 years old. And eventually, his automobile dealership failed, and my mother needed to find a way to earn money to support me and my brother and get us through school. And she wound up choosing to go back to South Florida, where she had been during World War II when living on military bases, and learn how to sell life insurance. She was going to sell life insurance to the people on military bases in and around Miami. That was the whole plan. So I went to junior high school and high school in Miami after having left Hendersonville in seventh grade.
Was it a big culture shock for you between North Carolina, which the only thing I remember from North Carolina, I remember I almost got a job in Charlotte back in '98. I remember it's a lot of trees. Aesthetically, it's just very relaxing, if you will. Miami's a whole different, more
That's so
humid.
funny. When I brought my wife here a few years ago, for the first 2 or 3 days, all she kept saying was trees, 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 trees. There's nothing but trees here. But yes, Hendersonville in the mountains in the western part of the state, 18 miles south of Asheville, is an idyllic resort town. Just beautiful, glorious. My grandparents lived there. My aunts and uncles in the Lampley family lived there. I was forced by the Henderson County school system to skip the fourth grade. So once my mother took me to Miami in the seventh grade, I was 1 year younger than everybody else in my class, heading into junior high school and then high school. And I was this kid from North Carolina, 1 year younger than everybody else. I was a social misfit. And that's part of how I became a teenage alcoholic. I was trying to fit in.
What were you up to when you were back as a teen? Were you, when you were in school, did you play sports? Was that part of your ecosystem, or were you working? What were you up to?
I was 100% certain that I was going to be a college level athlete. I was going to play sports in high school. And I will never forget the eighth grade day at South Miami Junior High School when I learned that I was the slowest kid in phys ed, that I could not run as fast as any of my phys ed classmates, and particularly not as fast as Ricky DeFrank, who ran the 50-yard dash in 6.2. I was like 8.1 or something like that. I was a slough. So at that point, I learned that the only sport I would ever play with any competence whatsoever was golf. And I did wind up being number 2 on the golf team, but that was not exactly high prestige at Southwest Miami High School, which was a 3,200 student motorcycle high school south of Coral Gables in kind of a tract house community where my mother would rent one crappy house after another, pretty much a new house every 2 years. And I was just constantly desperate. Can I get out of here? Can I get back to North Carolina? So getting into school in Chapel Hill was a holy grail type objective. And for that, I studied. For that, I did homework in high school. For that, I, put myself out and made sure that I was going to be able to get into school out of state at Carolina, which wasn't an easy thing to do. And then when I did do that and arrived here in Chapel Hill as a 17-year-old freshman, my only real goal was, can I get a fake ID and drink in these bars, even though I'm not 18 until April?
You said you had a older brother, but was that kind of the first time you'd ever kind of been on your own, that college experience?
Well, my older brother and I were lifestyle different. He was also in Chapel Hill. He had also come to school here. And there was in 1966, when I arrived, a fairly active and safe enough gay community in Chapel Hill. So that was my brother. He was maybe the bravest person I've ever known in my life. He came out at age 14
Really?
in Henderson, North Carolina. Yeah. So, try to top that for courage as a teenager. But the result of that was that my only real interactions with my brother once I was here in Chapel Hill were that every once in a while I would go to a party at his house, or every once in a while he would take me to a bar called the Tempo Room because they had the best roast beef sandwich in all of North Carolina. The Tempo Room was the most famous gay bar between Washington, D.C. and Atlanta. And my brother was, of course, a regular there. So we didn't spend that much time together. We didn't see that much of each other. We had different backgrounds. The story here is that, and I don't want to get too deep into details that you don't really need, but my mother's first husband was a highly decorated B-29 pilot from Berlin, Wisconsin. And he made it to lieutenant colonel flying B-29s off of Saipan over Japan. And when he came back at the end of the war, the transport plane bringing him back from Saipan crashed into a mountain in Brevard, North Carolina,
Really?
18 miles away. 18
Wow.
miles away from where his good friend, Jim Lampley, was already home in Hendersonville. The legend in my family, and it's surely apocryphal, is that on the morning after that crash, my father walked into his mother's kitchen in Hendersonville, and Grandma Mid said, "Jim, there's a radio report of a transport plane crashing in Brevard." And my father said, "Fred Tricky's on that plane." Now, the fact is, there's no way he could have known on what transport plane his buddy was coming back. That's something that my grandmother made up for the sake of embellishing the story. But he did 2 days later take a uniform and some medals to Tampa for my mother to bury so that she would have something to put into a casket. And they began seeing each other. That was late 1945, early 1946.
So did he and your father, did they know each other from being from North Carolina? Or
They were wingmates. Okay. Fred Trickey was from Berlin, Wisconsin. Jim Lampley was from Hendersonville, North Carolina, but they were wingmates in the same bomber squadron in World War II. So he ultimately wound up marrying my mother in 1948. I was born in 1949. My father died of cancer in 1954. So by the time my mother's 35, she's a double widow to two dead Air Force bomber pilots. She has one son by each of those two guys. The sons are personality very different, and she has to figure out how to earn enough money to raise these two boys. So her courage, perseverance, tenacity, resourcefulness, those are the reasons that I'm still here now.
Having just you and your brother, I mean, that had to have been sort of, she's definitely doing double duty as you're coming up. Were you cognizant of the burden that maybe that was on her when you were young? Like, did you understand, like, okay, double widow? To you as a kid, she's old, but she's only 35. Were you kind of cognizant of the burden that she was navigating?
Yes. I mean, I won't say I was oblivious to it. Mm-hmm. Was I sympathetic? Not nearly enough. Not anywhere close. I later felt tremendous guilt about the way that I treated her and the degree to which I failed to observe and support how difficult all that was for her. Because, of course, I was about my own objectives.
Right.
And my own objectives were, I want to play golf today. I want to get hold of some beer. A lot of my objectives created problems for her, but that was what she was there for, was to take care of me and to deal with whatever flack took place. And when I was in Hendersonville for the summers, because I always left Miami the day after school was out, all of the 7 remaining years or 8 remaining years of school after I moved from Hendersonville to Miami, I always left the day after school, took the train to Columbia, South Carolina, where my grandfather, Pappy, would drive down, pick me up, take me to Hendersonville, and spend the whole summer in Hendersonville at my grandmother and granddad's house being spoiled. And that created more problems for Mom because everything in Hendersonville was about catering to Jimbo. Everything in Miami was about how do we get through the week and do we have enough money for dinner Friday night and stuff like that. It was rough.
Yes.
I mean, she had a very rough existence.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, and especially about when you're a teenager, I don't think your empathy muscles nearly as flexed as or nearly as limber as it is as you get a little bit older.
There was a single turning point that, I mean, it's graphic, a single turning point that kind of reversed that and lit the flame for me. And that was when we were moving for about the 5th time in Miami from one crappy rented tract house to another slightly lesser crappy rented tract house, which would rent for slightly less. And this time it was on the 2nd floor of an apartment building that looked like a motel. And she was a bit of a pack rat, and she had all of the memorabilia related to her 2 husbands packed into cardboard boxes. And I was the person who always had to lift and carry and move and deal with the cardboard boxes when we would move, sometimes once a year, sometimes we would stay at a place for 2 years, never more than 2 years. So it was a 100-degree day in Miami. We were moving. I was lifting the cardboard boxes and hauling them up the stairs into the 2nd floor of this place. New experience. And at one point I got angry and I turned around and I yelled at her. And I said, I'm the one who always has to do this. Damn it. Why do we never get rid of anything in these boxes? And my mother looked at me and said, because other women my age have husbands who work to support them, and I have what's in those boxes. And that was graphic.
Right.
I got it. I understood. So she couldn't have elicited that kind of sympathy without confronting me. She did confront me. She confronted me the right way. And I was considerably more supportive and helpful and thoughtful to her in the years we spent in Miami, a couple more years before I went to college.
Hey, it's Mark Preston, and I would like to tell you a little bit about one of our sponsors, X-Chair. Whether you're working from home or in the office, if you have a job or a task that has you sitting for a long period of time, this is the chair for you. Very comfortable, very customizable. They'll make it pretty much any way you want it. The look, the feel, the fabrics, everything. Plus, this is the kind of chair you can adjust to make it fit you just right. No matter your body type, it's spot on. I love my X-Chair. It has the Elemax cooling, heating, and massage technology. It is going to make your lower back feel so very good. Got to throw a little bit of love to X-Chair. It's the chair I'm sitting in every time I talk to a guest. So I've had a lot of time to have my tush in this chair, and the tush, the back, everybody's happy. Just go to storyandcraftpod.com/chair. Once again, X-Chair, check it out, storyandcraftpod.com/chair. Love my X-Chair. Your back will thank you. This is right around your junior high years, I guess, and that's such a rough, weird time for every kid anyway, and anything.
Particularly when you're 1 year younger than everybody else in the
Yeah.
class, and you wanted to be an athlete, and you are the slowest guy in the foot races. I mean, and you and you have memorized the phone numbers for several of the very attractive girls in the class. And every night you sit in your den trying to do homework and thinking of calling one of these girls to ask for a date, but you never have the courage to actually do that because you're 1 year younger than they are. So it was a terrible kind of purgatory that I was living through during that period of time.
I'm getting flashbacks to my own seventh grade years, actually, roughly. But post grad, like, what was, where was the trajectory? Like, you got your grad degree, did the RTVF program. Did you immediately jump into a job? Were you interning? How did that manifest for you?
Well, first I finished undergraduate school, and I finished undergraduate school with a degree in English. I finished in a summer session, which was pretty typical for me at that time. I think I wound up graduating with 3 fall semesters, 4 spring semesters, and 7 summer sessions, or something like that. It was a ridiculous polyglot. But when I graduated, I wound up going to. It was early fall, the beginning of fall. I went to a post-football game party at somebody's house here in Chapel Hill. And at that party, I met my congressman's wife, a woman named Louise Galifianakis, whose husband, Nick Galifianakis, was a 3-term congressman from Durham and a professor at the Duke Business
Wait, isn't
School.
that
And when I met her,
Zach Galifianakis's the actor's father, right?
uncle,
Oh, okay. Because
uncle,
I
Matt
knew he had
Galifianakis.
some connection to that part of the country. That's where he's from. So okay.
He's from Mount Airy, North Carolina, and Nick and Louise lived in Durham, and Nick was his uncle. And at this party, I met Louise, and we were talking, and she says, "So you've just graduated?" I said, "Yes." She said, "So what are you going to do?" I said, I don't know. I really don't have any idea." She said, "Your degree is in English?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Can you write?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Show up at our campaign office at such and such a hotel in Raleigh, the Sir Walter Raleigh Hotel in Raleigh. Monday morning, you will have a job." I became assistant press secretary for the Galifianakis for Senate campaign. That was fall of 71. He was running for the United States Senate in 1972. We unseated an incumbent senator named B. Everett Jordan in the Democratic primary. It was the first time that an incumbent Democratic senator had been unseated in a primary in the South in more than 100 years since the Civil War era. It was a phenomenal accomplishment. I thought that we would win the general election against Jesse Helms, a television editorialist, and we lost to Jesse Helms. And that became the next giant heartbreak of my life. But I gained tremendous and valuable experience as a campaign press secretary for Nick Galifianakis. And at the same time, I had bumped into someone on campus who said, you know a lot about sports and you really talk well about sports. And I'm doing the pregame and postgame shows for the University of North Carolina radio network. Why don't you come and be the person who does the field interviews? Because I sit in the press box. So if you will take a portable tape player and go interview coaches and players after the game, then you can be on the radio. So I did that. And now I had 2 very good credentials going forward. And eventually I decided that I should go to graduate school. And that's when I
Okay.
went to interview with the Radio, Television, Motion Pictures Department dean and got into the graduate program at the Radio, Television, Motion Pictures Department and began studying for a master's degree in radio, television, and motion pictures, which I never got because when I finished the classroom work for that, I had been recommended by that faculty member, that chairman, for a once-in-a-lifetime, strange opportunity, ABC Sports was interviewing around the country. They wound up interviewing 432 college age or close to college age students to find someone to fill the role of the quote college age reporter, the first person who would ever stand on the sidelines of the camera, with a camera and microphone at football games to do a role which is now perfunctory, which is now an institution and a part of all college football broadcasts, but which had never been done before I did it, along with a Stanford graduate named Don Tollefson in 1974. And I was the person chosen from the 432 person talent hunt for the college age reporter. Now it's something for which they hire people who already have experience and have done broadcasting. And in fact, quite a lot of them are women. And I remember telling the producer of the college football telecast toward the end of that first season in 1974, what you're ultimately going to do with this role is to fill it with women, because that will give your director, who is obsessed with attractive young women, another chance to photograph attractive young women on the telecast. And if you note, most of the sideline reporters now, whether pro or college football or basketball or whatever, are women.
So were you taking a big bite out of this experience when you were in school and immediately thereafter? I mean, were you like, TV, that's what I'm doing? Or the path you're going to take, was that still a little bit up in the air for you?
So my first job was in radio, and I was on the University of North Carolina football and basketball radio networks. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't just, I was on the local station, WCHL, but it wasn't just the local station. I was on the network because the guy who owned and ran the local station saw and believed that I had the talent to do bigger things. But I will never forget, we're in the car on the road going to a basketball game one night, and we were just chatting about the business. And he was a very decorated and esteemed broadcast manager type here in North Carolina. And I remember him saying to me, by the way, he still lives here. He's a neighbor of mine. I remember him saying to me, Jim, you're really good at all of this on-air stuff. You have it. You have the right kind of gift. But the fact of the matter is, if you fall in love with being on the air and decide that that's your goal and that's your vocation, you could very easily wind up carrying equipment in New Bern when you're 46 years old. Now, I had seen New Bern during the political campaign. 46 sounded like a million to me. And he said, what you really want to do is to get into management, start out in sales, prove yourself in radio sales, get into management. Eventually, you'll become a station manager. Then you can wind up like me and have a chain of them, et cetera, et cetera. That's the way to make money in broadcasting. The whole thing of trying to become a star on the air, you think you want to be Walter Cronkite or Keith Jackson or one of those people, that's a needle in a haystack. The smart thing is going to be to follow the path I'm recommending to you. And all I could think was, I don't want to be carrying equipment in New Bern when I'm 46, but I also don't think I am a radio salesperson. So what's going to happen here? And what happened was not something I controlled. What happened was that, have you seen the movie November 5?
November 5, you say?
November 5 is the movie about ABC Sports' response and ABC News' response to the kidnapping and captivity of the 9 or 10, I think it's 10 Israeli athletes at Munich.
Yeah, okay.
In 1972, okay? During that captivity, 2 ABC reporters, Peter Jennings from the news side, Howard Cosell, of course, from the sports side, pushing the control room. How can we get closer? How can we get greater access? How can we get pictures from inside the Olympic Village, et cetera, et cetera? And through that process of dealing with Jennings and Cosell, the sports division learned that radio frequency, wireless, cameras and microphones would do things that they didn't know that they would do. They learned that the signal would go over concrete and metal barriers or around concrete and metal barriers. They learned that they had far more flexibility with those kinds of equipment than they thought they had had. And so when the whole thing was over and the Olympics were done, Network came back to New York, and there was a meeting among sports executives, news executives, and engineering executives to try to figure out what is it we can do now that we know this. And one of the first ideas that came up was we could put a reporter on the sidelines of a football game. Now, they knew from the beginning that it wouldn't be the sidelines of an NFL game because the NFL was more structured and restrictive. They wouldn't allow that. But through the vehicle of the Chevrolet Motor Company and an advertising agency named Dancer Fitzgerald Sample, ABC Sports practically owned college football. If they wanted to put a reporter on the sidelines of college football, they could go to the NCAA and say, we're going to do this. And nobody was going to say no because ABC was the goose that laid the golden egg. So that's how people first showed up on the sidelines of college football games. And Don Tollefson and I were the first two after we won, quote unquote, the talent hunt. And by the way, I was 25, not 18 to 22. There were other ways in which I didn't fit their original description. I was weeded out of the talent hunt pretty much from the beginning. I was not somebody they were considering as they got toward the end of it. It was late summer 1974. Roone Arledge, the legendary president of ABC Sports, was considering what had happened in the process. And Arledge said to his assistant, Dick Ebersol, who ran the talent hunt, said, is there anybody we've spoken to who actually has held a microphone and been in front of a camera? And Ebersol said, yeah, there's this one guy from North Carolina. He was kind of abrasive in the screening interview, and I didn't really get along with him, but he's got a lot of experience. Arledge said, let me see him. So on August 8, 1974, I was at a beach house in Swans Corner, North Carolina. Phone rang on the wall. To this day, I still don't know how Ebersol got that phone number, but he called to tell me that Arledge wanted to see me do an on-camera audition. And they had already chosen the subject for my on-camera audition, an interview that I would go and do in Birmingham, Alabama, with a down-on-his-luck professional quarterback named George Myra, who had been in the NFL, the CFL, the something L, and now was in the USFL. He was down to his last shot as a quarterback. And Arledge saw that as a great story. And I was being sent to Birmingham to interview him. Well, what Ebersol didn't know when he called to tell me that, what nobody in New York knew, was that having grown up in Miami, I had season tickets to watch George Myra play for Miami in the Orange Bowl. My mother had bought those. And Myra was one of my giant childhood and teenage years heroes.
Really? Okay.
And I still have.
So you already had all the prep already done. Yeah.
I didn't need to do any research. I already had a number 10 George Myra jersey in my closet in Chapel Hill the day that Ebersol called me to tell me that they wanted me to go do this particular interview so that all could see whether I should be the college-age reporter. And when I hung up the phone, my wife, Linda, and the two other people with whom we were traveling looked at me and said, what was that? And I said, I'm going to be the college-age reporter. They said, really? He told you that? They've chosen you? I said, no. They're reopening the process because they want to look at me, but the universe has already decided, and I'm going to be the college-age reporter. How do you know that? And I looked at my wife and said, they're sending me to interview George Myra. Oh, wow, that's stunning. So yeah, that's how my network television career began.
I remember speaking with Lee Steinberg, a sports agent. TV and its integration into sports really reshapes sports, like to some, not reshaped it, but it definitely is a big factor. Like you saying, ABC said we want sideline reporters. Now that you just expect at least one or two, on the sideline.
It's a convention. Yes, it is a convention, and it's a key pathway for people who want to get into the on-camera part of the business early. Used to be, in the old days, you didn't get on camera at a network until you had spent 15, 20, 25 years doing it at local stations and working your way up.
Yeah.
I didn't have to do that.
Growing up, I remember seeing people. Now, I had this big affection for television news. There would be people come through. I remember WFAA, and then they go off the network. Dallas was kind of one of those places people would come through. I thought that was a cool thing as a kid because for whatever reason, I was dialed into, how the sausage is made, as it were. It was always interesting to me. How does this all come together? Then I saw how much work TV folks had to do. I was like, nah, I'm going to stick with radio. It's a lot. It's a lot more work.
Again, you could wind up carrying equipment in New Bern at age 46 because you are judged subjectively. Eventually, you get to a point where you might be judged objectively, particularly if you are a local news anchor in a major market. And I eventually had that experience too, long way down the road from where we are. But sportscasters aren't judged according to the ratings of the sports events that they're televising. The events themselves are evaluated according to the ratings, but the sportscasters aren't seen as having anything to do with that. So it's just a matter of, are you good? Do you satisfy the audience with your storytelling? Do you satisfy the executives at the station or network with your storytelling? And those are subjective, not objective criteria.
Yep. I mean, in looking at your career, was it a pretty quick jump? Like we're talking about local news. Did you do that for a while and then get into the network thing? Or did you find yourself in the network side of things relatively quickly?
So I become the college age reporter in 1974. And I'm working for ABC Sports. So I'm identified from 1974 onward as a network person. The original idea of the college age reporter is that you would do 1 year and then they would go out and find somebody else, and there would be another one the second year, another one the third year. But of course, that idea went the way of all flesh because the whole talent hunt and recruiting process was ungainly. And once Arledge saw me on the air, he basically said, okay, that's it. That's what we were looking for. That's what we wanted. So to my great discomfort and chagrin, I was angry about it, really. I was made to do the sidelines of college football for 3 years. But the whole time, my mentor at the network, a head of production named Chuck Howard, told me, don't worry, we're going to find other things to do for you and with you in the months between college football and end of season, beginning of season, et cetera.
Plus, at that age, you're hardwired to be the most impatient person on the planet. You want it right now.
Of course. Yeah. And they had Wide World of Sports. And Wide World of Sports was a weekly, telecast, sometimes both days, Saturdays and Sundays. And it had all of those arcane folklore type events, the lumberjacks, wrist wrestling, the, motorcycles on ice, the New York State Firemen's Competition, et cetera, et cetera. None of the other announcers on the staff wanted to go back to do those events again.
Yeah.
Most everybody had done them once, right? So I became the guinea pig who had to go do the wrist wrestling 4 times and the lumberjacks 4 times and New York State Firemen's Competition 4 times, et cetera, et cetera. That was my apprenticeship, was week after week, crazy Wide Worlds. And then eventually, after several years of that, along came the ultra endurance culture. Ultra endurance didn't exist when I first started doing Wide World in 74. It wasn't until we first noticed a thing called the Ironman Triathlon, and then a thing called the Race Across America, which was a nonstop bicycle race from the coast of California to the Empire State Building. And I wound up being the person to go do those. Why? I was still in my 20s or early 30s, and all the other announcers were in their 50s or 60s. They didn't want to go out on the road and watch bicyclists pedal all the way across the country. So I wound up doing those things. And eventually I had a very broad apprenticeship at ABC Sports. And by the way, first year of sidelines is 74. First year of doing Wide Worlds is 75. Innsbruck Olympics, Winter Olympics in 1976. I was promised by the head of production that I would be there, and I did go. That was the first of what wound up being 14 trips to the Olympic Games. So, it all germinated from being the guinea pig on the sidelines and then the guinea pig on Wide World, and having to prove myself in a system where all the other senior, more experienced, more broadly exposed announcers had already done all the stuff that I was doing.
But doing it at a high level early on, you set a high bar for yourself, I'm assuming. You already you were already had a mentality of network mentality. You've done football, you've done basketball, boxing, of course. When you started going, okay, I'm going to do this thing, this is what I would really like to cover. This is where my jam is. Or we just like throw me everywhere. I don't care. What was that for you?
So my colleagues at ABC Sports at the beginning, the people with whom I was working in competition for spots on the production schedule, were all legendary figures.
Mm-hmm.
Howard Cosell, Jim McKay,
Jim McKay, yeah.
Bill Fleming, Chris Schenkel, Frank Gifford. I could go on, but you get the point.
Mm-hmm.
These were all people with very high identities, broad exposure, dossiers that were going to put them in Hall of Fame type situations. I stuck out like a sore thumb. I was the kid on the sidelines who was now the kid in the office building at 1336th Avenue and was going out to do all, and they loved me in a certain way,
mm-hmm.
because my presence there meant none of them would have to go back and do the wrist wrestling or the barrel rolling or the log jumping again and again and again. I was done. I was there to do that. But there was no welcome wagon. And eventually, as I began to improve my assignments, okay, so now I'm going to do the U.S. Track and Field Championships. McKay used to do that. Now I'm going to do the U.S. Long Course Swimming Championships. Keith Jackson used to do that. And so as I moved along, they had reason to begin to be less comfortable about my upward mobility.
Yeah.
But my upward mobility was the product of the fact that I could do this, and I could do it pretty well.
Was there anybody in particular that you would kind of feel direct mentorship, have direct mentorship from them, or feel like, they were your North Star? That was, be it stylistic or be it just trajectory of their career. Was there anybody you looked at and you're like, that's the guy, that to me would be success if I'm in his shoes?
Well, that would have been Jim McKay, mm-hmm. because the biggest role at ABC Sports, bigger even than play-by-play on college football or play-by-play on Major League Baseball, the biggest role at the network where I worked was host of the Olympics. So I wanted to be eventually host of the Olympics. And I probably was a little bit too open and assertive in making clear that that was what I wanted, because eventually McKay figured that out. And that became a kind of an obstruction or a barrier between him and me, logically, but yeah, at the end of the day, I would have wanted McKay to be my mentor. He had no interest in being my mentor. To the degree that I had a mentor, it was a guy named Chuck Howard, who was the senior producer, head of production, and produced the college football telecast. He was the one who really put his imprimatur on me from the beginning and anointed me and kept going to Arledge's office to say, he needs to do this, he needs to do this, I want to see him move up to this and stuff like that. So Chuck guided and fostered my career at ABC Sports.
Well, I think some of the people who are off air have a sense of perspective that, it's kind of forest of the trees when you're part of the on-air crew, and then the people who are off air, sometimes they can be wonderful mentors because they're sort of seeing things from a 30,000 foot view. They kind of see everything.
Well, it's extremely interactive. They're the people who are sitting in a control booth and who are in your ear while you're on the air. Mm. They're the people who are watching you in the monitor and telling you what we need to do next, et cetera, et cetera. So absolutely, they have the most graphic and complete sense of what it is you can do and why it is you ought to be doing it. And So, I was treated very well by all of those people. And, when on those rare occasions when I would bump into Roone or have any contact with Roone, he would always say something to let me know, you're right where we want you to be. You are a fixture. You're going to become an institution here. This is your long-term career. And what you want at ABC Sports, you keep working the way you're working, you'll get there.
That had to be very empowering. It's so funny you're saying, because bringing back all these memories. When you're the young guy, you're kind of, as like you said, as long as you're not a threat, as long as you're not somebody that may take somebody's job or they perceive it as such, it's a wonderful place to be because of learning this osmotically soaking up the stuff. Now, I mean, carrying that forward, though, if you move forward in the boxing realm, it seems like boxing back 80s, even part of the 90s, that was more marquee like events. Like there are always big events, don't get me wrong, but it seemed to be a little more mainstream because I was growing up, like you had Sugar Ray Leonard, everybody knew who the boxers were, Now it felt a little bit different, especially with the Tyson fight that they just did. It felt a little circusy. What are your thoughts on that? I'm just kind of curious because you've been up front and center with boxing for so long.
In the 1920s, there were 3 or 4 sports in American culture which actually had audience following and about which people cared. College football, horse racing, baseball, and boxing. Maybe to a greater degree boxing than any of the others. John L. Sullivan was the single biggest media star in the culture before the turn of the century. Jack Dempsey was the Roaring Twenties. He embodied the Roaring Twenties. And so boxing was a huge sport. The very first television sports event that my mother ever sat me down to watch after my father died when I was 6 years old in Hendersonville. She took me to a party at a friend's house, sat me down in front of a little television set on a TV dinner tray in a spare bedroom and said, sit here. This is what you would be doing if your father was still alive. You're going to watch Gillette Friday night fights. It's Sugar Ray Robinson versus Bobo Olson for the middleweight championship of the world. And again, if your father were alive, this is what you'd be doing. And oh, by the way, you're going to enjoy Sugar Ray Robinson. He dances while he fights. And so, again, the first televised sports event I ever watched was a boxing match. And I, from that point forward, age 6, grew up watching the Friday night fights somewhat religiously every Friday night. When my mother ultimately moved us to Miami, there were boxing matches in Miami.
Yeah.
The first one I ever went to was Cassius Clay versus Sonny Liston for the heavyweight championship, February 25, 1964. And that night, at my first live boxing match, I witnessed what was up to that moment the biggest upset in the history of boxing. 26 years later, in Tokyo, when Buster Douglas knocked out Mike Tyson, I would call for the American audience the fight which supplanted Clay versus Liston as the biggest upset in the history of boxing. My book is titled, It Happened, because those are the words that came out of my mouth the night that George Foreman knocked out Michael Moorer to become the heavyweight champion at age 45, oldest ever heavyweight champion. But I was originally assigned to boxing after 13 years at ABC Sports in 1987 by an incoming new chief executive, the guy who replaced Roone Arledge as the head of the sports division, and he assigned me to boxing to get rid of me.
Oh, really?
He thought, he was certain that I would be a bad fit, both in terms of my own exposure to the sport, because I looked to him like a preppy Eastern white kid who wouldn't have anything to do with it, and also because of how the sport would react to and resist me. So he wanted to get rid of me. He wanted me to walk away from my contract at ABC Sports, and his vehicle for doing that was to assign me to boxing. He did not realize that the sports division that he was now running had just a few weeks before signed a get acquainted, look-see contract with a 19-year-old heavyweight from upstate New York whose name was Mike Tyson.
Mhm.
The very first fight I ever called on network television, ABC Sports, was Mike Tyson versus Jesse Ferguson, which was one of Tyson's formative experiences on his way to becoming heavyweight champion, Mike Tyson. So from the beginning, I knew that boxing was not going to destroy my resume or get rid of me as a sportscaster. It was going to be a path to more work and more exposure.
Yeah, it's like a fertile ground for you.
I wound up at HBO. Okay, so he managed to get me to leave ABC, but he did it via a method that gave me a ticket to what was now the most artistically respected and prominent television network in the world, HBO.
Mhm.
That was not what he had in mind, but that's what happened.
I was not a great sports reporter, but I did a little bit of it. But one of the things I found is that I really enjoyed, after a while, you get to be in the press box, you get the seemingly aspirationally where people, I'd love to be in the press box and watch. There are a lot of things like baseball. I like being in the stands. To me, I like to be there enjoying it like everybody, it's meant to be enjoyed, if you will. Was there ever anything that you ever watched and you're like, you know what? I love doing this, but I'd love just to take a moment to be a spectator, in this moment. I don't know if that makes sense at all, because of course, when you're covering something, you got additional responsibilities, obviously, besides just enjoying the game or the, match or whatever. Was there ever anything you're like, you just found yourself being more of a spectator than a reporter because it was the gravity of the moment or something like that?
Oh yeah, many, 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 lots of them. The very first Olympic event I ever went to was the first event at the 1976 Winter Olympics in Innsbruck, Austria, 100 miles down the road from Munich, where the last previous Olympics, the 72 Summer Olympics, had been interrupted and corrupted by the captivity of the Israeli athletes. But on the first day of the first Olympics, I was covering as a broadcaster, as a feature reporter. I was sent to Patrickhofer Mountain in Innsbruck for the downhill. I had never seen a downhill ski race. And the race was regarded as a competition between the number one Austrian downhiller, Franz Klammer, and the number one Swiss downhiller, Bernhard Russi. And I was doing a feature piece on the economic implications of the downhill, because Americans were not equipped to understand how it was that a competition between two amateur athletes could be worth tens of millions of dollars to whichever country was the host country of the guy who won. In other words, if Franz Klammer won, that meant ski packages, boots, goggles, gloves, et cetera, from Austria would be sold. But if Russi won, that meant that all that equipment from Switzerland would be sold. So this was a competition between two, quote, amateur athletes, which reflected tens of millions of dollars of economic competition. I was fascinated by that. And I was on the hill that day for Klammer's downhill run, which is pretty much generally regarded as the most memorable alpine skiing event of all time. And I was just a spectator that day. I had a lot of those kinds of experiences. And yeah, there was never a moment in my sports broadcasting career when the spectator in me was not a part of it.
Right.
Even when I'm calling a fight, I'm a spectator. Even when I'm sitting in the studio hosting Olympics, I'm a spectator. I did 7 interviews in Montreal in 1976 with Bruce Jenner on his way to winning the decathlon. So I had enough time and exposure and intimate contact with Bruce Jenner that at one point he said to me, we're on camera so often here, people are going to think there's something going on. Imagine thinking of that now.
Well,
But he remained a
well, it's so wonderful. You've had all these experiences. You've been to all these events, different kinds of sports, and you had a very colorful, full career. But was there anything that you didn't have a chance to see that you're like, I really wanted to see that game, that match, that fight? Was there something you ever didn't get a chance to go to that you really like? I wish I could have seen that.
Well, I covered Wimbledon 12 times, but I've never been to the French Open.
Mhm.
And that's an entirely different competitive and cultural experience. Um, yeah, there were things that I missed out on, but you couldn't possibly complain either to yourself or anybody else because my entire career was a gift. It wasn't something that happened via conventional circumstances. And if ever they had known exactly who it was they were interviewing at ABC Sports, if ever they had known that I had a George Myra jersey in my closet, they wouldn't have sent me to interview him for the audition. If ever they had known that I had grown up in Hendersonville, North Carolina, 4 or 5 doors away from Arledge's parents in Laurel Park, and that his mother and my mother were in the same bridge club, I would never have been interviewed to begin with. So there were all sorts of behind the screen secrets that they didn't know about me, which could have prevented all of it from ever happening.
Now, before we get going, I do something I call my 7 questions, just a last bit of fun. First question I always ask everybody, because I always talk food at least once. If you could isolate, what is your favorite comfort food? You've had a bad day or even a great day, something like this just it lands, irrespective of how healthy it is, your favorite comfort food.
Pizza. And, some of that probably has to do with it's the most convenient food. And if you've worked in television, you've been in edit bays, you've been in control rooms, you've been in all of the kinds of facilities in which people work on television. The food is going to be something you can hold in your hand.
Yeah, something you don't eat with a spoon and it's liquid, because that the engineers will yell at you. Yeah.
So yeah, my comfort food is pizza, 100%.
Any particular topping that's top of the list for you?
I will eat pepperoni, but I'm basically a tomato and cheese kind of guy. Plain pizza is my favorite.
Very good. Very good. Now, if you were to sit down and have a coffee and talk story for a few hours, living or not, who would be 3 people that you would like to sit down with at the table and have as part of this conversation for a few hours?
Muhammad Ali. And I did meet him and I did become friendly with him. And he babysat my daughter one whole day at a U.S. Boxing Writers Association luncheon in New York, or dinner in New York. So Muhammad Ali would be number 1 and way above almost anybody else. Somebody that I would want to sit down and talk with. But, the bottom line is I did talk to just about everyone I ever wanted to. I mean, if I could have another 12 hours with Arthur Ashe, Billie Jean King, and Martina Navratilova. If I could repeat that. And I covered Wimbledon on HBO for 12 years. And that meant many, many summer days spent in the announce booth with Arthur and Billie Jean and Martina. And they are 3 of the most cosmic individual human beings you could ever meet. Yeah, that would probably be the thing I would most want to repeat and have back is time with those people. Because each of the 3 is in a class by himself or herself for intelligence, dignity, broad-mindedness, understanding of what their sport and their world is all about. I can still, every day of my life, I can hear Billie Jean saying to me, Jim, the only ball that matters is the next one coming over the net. The last one didn't matter. The one that's coming up next doesn't matter. This ball coming over the net right now, that's the only thing that matters. I choke up when I think about it because it meant so much to me to learn lessons like that from a person like that. And I can't say enough about it.
It's sort of a way through tennis of explaining you got to live in the moment. You got to be here right now to be a participant.
Right.
But each one of those individuals socially contributed so much as well beyond the sport. And
that's my reason. Yeah, that's why I care. I mean, I care about the whole society. I care about news events. I cared about everything that matters. My mother taught me to be that way. So the athletes who most appeal to me, who did I mention? Muhammad Ali, Billie Jean King, Martina Navratilova, Arthur Ashe. Every one of them has a socio-political impact that sets them apart from others.
The impact each one had is, Martina Navratilova, not one to hold back either. I kind of like the way Martina Navratilova and who was the big rivalry in the 80s? Chris Everett. There we go. Yeah.
Are you aware of the recent circumstances?
No.
I don't know where we stand right now, but as of a couple of months ago, they both had cancer.
Oh.
And they were each other's late night phone partner. Okay. Martina and Chris, both battling cancer, both going to bed only after having one last conversation at the end of the day with each other. Now, I don't know all the numbers correctly, but they played 78 Grand Slam matches. They each won the same number. They won the same number of overall Grand Slam championships, basically. They both were number one pretty much the same number of times. So it is statistically, unquestionably, the greatest individual rivalry in the history of sports. And for them both to be sharing this experience now, obviously, I tear up.
Yeah, they were. I remember watching tennis with my grandmother. We always used to come. I live on South Padre Island, Texas now, and we used to come down here. Our family did, and I would remember Wimbledon always happened. In summer, my grandmother and I would watch every day. We'd watch Wimbledon, and she just loved Chris Evert Lloyd. She just loved her. You wanted to see them play together, or against each other. Now, if we were to go back. When you were a young man, who was your first celebrity crush as a kid?
Is her name Sally Field?
Sally Field, yeah. Oh, gosh.
She played Gidget, right?
She was in the TV show Gidget, wasn't she? Yeah, that was because there was a movie. And
there was a movie, which was Sandra Dee, I believe, but Sally Field played Gidget on TV. Of course, I later met her.
Oh, really?
I met her and told her that she had been my celebrity crush.
When I was a little kid, when I saw Smokey and the Bandit, I was like, oh, she was kind of my first like a little bit older. That and Olivia Newton-John, being a little kid, first older lady crush, but they were probably only in their 30s. Last couple questions here. Now, if you're going to be forced to live on an exotic island, somewhere you really want to be, you want to be on this, it's a beautiful place, but you're going to be there for a full year. There's no streaming, no internet. For music, you're going to have to bring one CD, something you can listen to over and over again, and bring one DVD of a movie you can watch over and over again. It can be a box set, if you will. What would that CD and what would that DVD be that you could listen to and watch all year long?
Wow, that's tough. I mean, I have broad and varied and, I think rich music tastes. If I'm going to listen to one CD all year round, what would that be? So Bob Dylan, either Bringing It All Back Home or the next album, which had Like a Rolling Stone. The name of the album is not leaping up to me right now, but just heard some of the music again, obviously, when I went to see the movie.
Oh, I so want to see the movie. He's having I have not.
You've got to go see Complete Unknown. It's a very good movie, and it's a tremendous characterization by Timothée Chalamet. So, yeah, I'll take a Dylan album with me.
All right.
And the movie, which I've already watched over and over and over, and which I could watch 100 times. Well, I'm going to name 3, which is cheating, but I've probably watched To Kill a Mockingbird 50 times already.
Hmm.
I've pretty much memorized To Kill a Mockingbird, but it never fails to satisfy me and enrich me. Um, so if you're going to go in that direction, then you should probably acknowledge that you want to rewatch and should rewatch many times Citizen Kane.
Oh yeah.
Uh, I'll start with To Kill a Mockingbird and Citizen Kane, and the um, the movie within the past year about the World War II bomb project. Name
Oh,
isn't
Oppenheimer.
leaping. Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those three: Oppenheimer, Citizen Kane, To Kill a Mockingbird.
Very good. With streaming, you can find just about anything at any given time. And it's like, I need to start kind of diving into some older movies, I have to keep up with so much new stuff, though. But
Have you watched To Kill a Mockingbird 20 times?
not 20, but I've watched it a good few times. It's all,
Good. Okay.
it's very, it never loses its relevance.
Never loses its relevance. Never loses its charm. And being an emotional person as I am, never loses the 8 or 10 places where I tear up before I hear the line.
Mhm.
Like, Miss Scout, stand up. Your father's passing. I have a granddaughter named Scout,
Really? Okay.
and yeah, she's named Scout because her mother saw To Kill a Mockingbird maybe 10 times when she was a kid. So
That's a sweet connection. Did they live near y'all?
that daughter lives here in Chapel Hill.
Okay. So you have easy access to your granddaughter there.
That granddaughter, I think Deborah and I have 7 grandchildren who now live here in Chapel Hill.
Really?
But people followed us. People followed us across the country. 2 of her daughters followed her across the country. One of my daughters followed me across the country. They all now live here in Chapel Hill. Pretty thrilling. They didn't have any connection to this place other than us.
Well, that's fantastic. I can only imagine. I'm probably a few years away from that. My oldest is 20, about to be 22, but I'm like that day will come and going. Wonder what that's going to be like. That's kind of the next step.
My eldest daughter is 44, and you should probably do a session with her, although I don't think she would have time to do this. My eldest daughter um, used to be global chair of fine art at Sotheby's,
Uh-huh.
and now she's running the world's largest gallery chain, a gallery chain called Gagosian. So, by the business standard of the art world, I believe you're within your rights to say that my eldest daughter is the #1 art marketer in the world. She's the person you go to if you want to buy a Picasso for $30 million, or you want to buy a Rothko, or you want to buy some other major artist work.
Well,
She's
I
the
need to
person who
check my
does it.
little coin jar over there. I'm not quite sure. I may come up a couple of quarters short,
Right.
but
Yeah, me either. Yeah.
now, if you were to define stem to stern from the time you woke up to the time you went to sleep, the component parts of a perfect day for you. If you said if you had these things happen, that's going to line up to be a pretty solid day in your mind. What would those things be, or what would be the component parts of a perfect day?
So I get up and have breakfast and coffee with my wife and one or both of her daughters and some of the grandchildren. That would be great. I go to the Dean Dome here in Chapel Hill, and UNC beats Duke in a basketball game. I eat pizza at a restaurant named Mercato, where my favorite pizza is a thing called a Rosso pizza that doesn't have cheese on it. And I come back and build a fire in our fireplace and gaze out at my carefully well lit 6+ acres, giant backyard. You can almost see the lake through the trees, et cetera, et cetera. All those things I now have. And so many of my days are like perfect days. We don't beat Duke every day, but last year we beat them twice. So those are perfect days for me.
Very, very nice. Now, the last two questions. If you weren't doing this for a living, this was not an option. Somebody said, nope, you can't. Sports was not going to be your thing. What would have been the number two? What else could you have seen yourself doing for a living?
I wanted to be a newscaster. Eventually, I did become a newscaster. I would have wanted to succeed Walter Cronkite or Peter Jennings or Tom Brokaw or one of those network television news anchors. Instead, I became primary news anchor for a network owned and operated station in Los Angeles, KCBS TV, where I covered earthquakes and car chases and various other news stories in the Los Angeles market. So I got my taste of news anchoring. I always thought, because I got into this from a politics base, that I was a little bit miscast as a sportscaster. I wasn't. Being a sportscaster was the right avocation, or the right vocation, I should say, for me, and the right thing for me to do. But in my original vision of what I was going to be as a television broadcaster, I was Walter Cronkite, David Brinkley, Chet Huntley, those people.
People I wish we had back right now. You know, and this
We all wish we had back, but now we don't. And I spent 5 semesters teaching here in Chapel Hill, teaching a course called Evolution of Storytelling in American Electronic News Media. And I was very purposely teaching a news media course rather than a sports media course, because it means something. It's important.
Yeah.
And the more I got to know my students, the more disenchanted I became with the atmosphere in which I was trying to teach the kinds of things that Murrow and Cronkite and all of those great newscasters had created. And eventually I would come into class once or twice a week and say, if you wake up in the morning and you get your first dose of daily news from your preferred social media feed, whatever it is, you are asking to be colonized, you are asking to be subdivided, you are asking to be misled, you're asking even to be lied to. And this is not the way to consume news in our current society. They didn't listen to me. And what's the result of that? Well, sitting in the White House right now.
I remember studying broadcast journalism at Texas Tech University. I remember a professor going, no matter how you try to be unbiased, you have cultural things. You have things you can try work your ass off to be unbiased, but there's some things that leak through. And
we all live within ourselves. We all live in our own personas and our own bodies, etc. We all have our own perceptions. That's why there's professional training for newscasters, is so that you do learn the disciplines by which you can steel yourself against operating according to your own personal prejudices. That doesn't exist anymore.
There was pride. The folks I spoke with, there was pride in being agnostic when it came to just presenting the story, as opposed to a coloration of it. And I think that's
100%. Did you ever eat the chicken fried steak at the Lubbock Inn?
No, I don't think. No, I did not.
Darrell Royal introduced me to the chicken fried steak at the Lubbock Inn in 1974. And it was indeed very good food.
It's funny. I went there in the University of North Texas, and I'm more ascribed to the University of North Texas because I was
Denton?
Yeah, yep, Denton, just about 45 minutes north of Dallas. Yeah, and
Don Henley's hometown.
I just learned something today. I did not know Don Henley was from Denton.
Trying to get down to the heart of the matter.
Well, the last question I got for you is, if you were to go back, if you could jump into your DeLorean, let's say, and travel back to when you were 16 years old, you got one piece of advice to give yourself, a couple minutes with younger you, either to make that moment a little bit better, or get yourself maybe on a different path. What would that piece of advice be to 16-year-old you?
Save the beeraholic part of you until you have already graduated from college. Get something done before you go and spend hours of every day sitting in the shack buying 35-cent Budweiser beers, and then go to the SAE house at night and lose your Oldsmobile Cutlass in a poker game. I would try to avoid all of the misbehaviors that ultimately positioned me as the mortgage loan clerk at First National Bank of Miami in 1968, 69, and 70. And then I wouldn't have to start over. Now, ultimately, I erased all that and I wound up in graduate school, and I got to some meaningful professional levels. That's the reason the book is titled It Happened, is because it's all so utterly counterintuitive that these things could have happened to me. But they did. But yeah, if I had one thing to say to myself, it would be, don't take this path. On the other hand, think about it. That is the path by which I got to where I am. That's the path by which I got to the point where I have an autobiography that the publisher is excited about and think is going to sell. That's the path by which I've developed acquaintances and friendships, under which, for instance, my nightly phone partner now, 2 or 3 times a week on the phone, is America's most celebrated and prolific drama writer, another Texan named Taylor Sheridan.
Really?
And Taylor Sheridan wrote the foreword for my book.
Really? He is my current creative crush. I will say that, because he is.
Well, he's everybody's current creative crush.
He is a dynamo, I tell you.
And he calls me at 10 o'clock his time, 11 o'clock my time at night. And we spend an hour and a half on the phone. My wife actually moved to another bedroom because of my phone habit with Taylor Sheridan. And between you and me, not to be spread around, she now refers to him as my boyfriend. Is your boyfriend calling tonight? But, we caught up. We watched some of Yellowstone. We've watched Landman. We're now watching Lioness, getting ready for season 2. He's amazing.
Oh, so you're still in season 1 of Lioness.
Amazing.
Well, at the end, I've spoken. Last few actors I've spoken with, and we've discussed this. When you see the title, when you see the credit come up at the end, written by Taylor Sheridan, not a team of writers, written by Taylor Sheridan. He's got
100%.
And you see all the shows he's got on. He's not phoning it in. I don't know how he
Correct.
has time to write. Like Landman is
my friend, the former CEO of HBO, Richard Plepler, who was chairman of HBO for many of the years that I worked there and greenlit all the big dramas at HBO. Richard has said to me 2 or 3 times since he's learned about my acquaintance with Taylor Sheridan, he says, I don't understand how he does it.
Yeah.
I have no idea how one person could be producing all of that at the level of which he's writing. But he is. I asked him, you'll love it. I asked him, I said, Taylor, did you know when you got cast in Sons of Anarchy that you really wanted to be a writer, producer, director? And he said, no, Jim. He said, it was the experience of getting cast in Sons of Anarchy and trying to act my way through all of those horrible scripts that convinced me I needed to be a producer, writer.
The thing I respect about him, one of the things I respect the most about him is that he made a commitment. I'm going to do this thing. And boy, he did it,
Oh, he's committed. When he told me blithely, that he wanted to write the foreword for my book in a bar in Las Vegas after a boxing match. All right. I came back and told my as told to author, Taylor's going to write the foreword for the book. He said, are you crazy? Look at all the stuff he's doing. Do you really think Taylor Sheridan is going to find time within his schedule to write the foreword for the book? You fall for Hollywood BS, et cetera, et cetera. He delivered the foreword on exactly the day that the publisher had cited as the deadline. When Taylor says he's going to do something, he's going to do it. There's no question about it. So it's an amazing friendship. And by the way, why am I friends with Taylor Sheridan? Boxing. He is a boxing lover from the word go, and he is now going into gyms in both New York and Las Vegas and sparring with professional fighters. And I think you'll see that in a drama somewhere down the road.
I've always want to speak with him. I know a couple of his people, and it's like, he's just so busy right now. And it's like, I'd kill to talk to him. Just because you look at what he's done, the themes he puts in there. One of the things I notice is that all of his shows feature strong women, which is
Oh yeah.
kind of like one of those things you don't really notice. And you think about like his shows, like these women, like you look at the British actress, she's 1923, Helen Mirren.
Yeah. Helen Mirren.
I mean,
Yeah.
you look at,
She's fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. Why do you suppose Taylor has all those strong women characters?
that's one of the things I would love to ask him, because every show.
How much have I told you about my mother? Do
Oh,
you think I would have had my career if my mother had not shaped me the way she did? My
true.
mother, my mother bought season tickets to go to University of Miami football games. My mother saw to it that I could have a ticket to go see Cassius Clay versus Sonny Liston. That ticket, I think, cost $100, which was
Really?
unbelievable.
That's a lot of money back then. Yeah.
That was 1964. Okay. It's 1964. So the bottom line is Taylor's mother was like my mother. All right. It's one of the reasons that we have commonality and we speak with each other.
I've never heard anybody else mention that, but I just noticed from show to show, basically the heartbeat of the show really emanates from some kind of strong woman, or even in the way Billy Bob Thornton's daughter in Landman, the way she just kind of matures.
Well, how about the Mexican girl in Landman?
That's what I was thinking about also.
Whose husband gets killed and winds up in a relationship with the guy who created the accident, who killed him. You know, who conceives that character? Taylor does.
It's so wonderful that you've got that. I think having storytellers, you have stories, he's got stories, and I think those kind of people are so much fun to just sit
That's
down
what
with.
we talk about. We talk about boxing and we talk about storytelling. And what a thrill. What a thrill that after a lifetime of doing storytelling at one level, I can converse with him and he respects me. It's fabulous.
I think those kind of situations, relationships, just make you better, make you appreciate people and time and the place you're in a lot more, I think. But
he's a great man. And he's a great man and a great friend. I could not be more enthusiastic about what has happened between me and that person. And I'm so thrilled for all of his constant and ongoing successes.
I so appreciate the time you've spent with me. This was so much fun. I really appreciate it. I know you're super busy and I'm excited about the book. What's the release date on that?
April 15, but you can pre-order now on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And the title of the book is It Happened. And the author is Jim Lampley. And it's the story of my life.
And that's a wonderful story. I'm looking forward to getting into it, kind of filling in all the blanks here, because of course there's only so much we can cover in this time. But looking forward to the book coming out, and anything I could do to help you out down the line, please just don't hesitate to reach out. It'd be a tremendous pleasure.
My privilege. Thank you very much, Mark.
Okay, there you go, Jim Lampley. Oh, man, I enjoy talking to him. I love storytellers. I love sitting down with people who have a rich well of experience to share. Of course, we don't have enough time to cover all of the Jim Lampley experience, so that's why there's a book that's out right now for you to check out. It comes out on April 15th. The book, It Happened, A Uniquely Lucky Life in Sports Television. You can get it on pre-order right now. So wherever you get your books from does make a difference. Pre-order it. I guarantee you it's one book that I am so looking forward to checking out when it comes out. Also, as I mentioned at the top of the show, the wonderful Jordan Bridges sent over a link, as promised a few episodes ago, a link to his Spotify playlist, custom crafted just for you and I. It is at storyandcraftpod.com. When you are there, just go to his episode. It's a few episodes down. You'll see it right there. You'll see his lovely punum, his face right there. So click on that, and at the bottom of the episode description, you will see the link. Also, look at the top of the page because there is a link. It is called California Fire Support. Click on it. You'll be taken to a page that gives you a few links. Choose whichever one you'd like. Jump in there, help out the good folks in California who were affected by the wildfires. Thank you again to Jordan Bridges. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Also, while you're at the website, storyandcraftpod.com, make sure to pop over to storyandcraftpod.com/rate. That way you can rate the show, leave some stars. It really does a lot to help folks find the show. You can just jump into your podcast app, whichever one you're using. You can follow the show. That's a great idea because you get notified every time we have a new episode. So there you go. Thank you again to Jim Lampley. So enjoyed talking to him. Looking forward to that book. Looking forward to reading up and kind of finding out more about the stories he was telling us about today. So that's all I got for you today. I got the puppy, Ranger, under my feet, being nice and quiet and relaxed. We're going to go outside and do a little walk. And as I always say, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. You stopping by, making what I've got going on here part of whatever you've got going on. So go have yourself a great rest of the week, and we'll talk to you in a few days right here on Story and Craft.
That's it for this episode of Story and Craft. Join Mark next week for more conversation right here on Story and Craft. Story and Craft is a presentation of Mark Preston Productions, LLC. Executive producer is Mark Preston. Associate producer is Zachary Holden. Please rate and review Story and Craft on Apple Podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. You can subscribe to show updates and stay in the know. Just head to storyandcraftpod.com and sign up for the newsletter. I'm Emma Dillon. See you next time, and remember, keep telling your story.
Come on.